I always feel like I'm a game show host when I come out from the back. So come on now, let's Price is Right. What do they have here? What kind of game show do they have in Germany, Berlin? There are no game shows here. No one wins money, does stupid stuff, wins money. Okay. All right, fine. My name is Kim Crayton. I am a community engineer, and this talk is What the Docs? How to write and read documentation that gets shit done. I'd like to introduce who I am. I am a community engineer. Someone gave me that title when I was at a closure conference, and I was like, oh, that sounds great. Let me look up I'm a word person, I'm a researcher. So what does that mean? Well, community, when I looked up, it's the heart. It's the H-E-A-R-T. People's mission, their vision, the thing that makes them feel good. They want to get up in the morning like, yay! But it's the hard crap. An engineer is how do you operationalize those things? How do you turn that mission and vision into something that can be measured? And so I am a community engineer. You can find me at Kim Crayton1 on Twitter. I have a podcast called Community Engineering Report, where I talk about inclusion and diversity in tech from a economic business perspective. I don't want to argue with you about your politics or your morals. This is about money. So that's what I talk about. And I also have 2 events that are coming up. They're going to be in Atlanta in April. I have Inclusion Symposium, where I'm bringing in people who do this job, who are in inclusion and diversity, who need support. It's like we're all over the place, and we want to come together for a 2-day retreat and figure out, get on the same mission, and we can move these things out. And then Inclusion Conf, which is in August, which I am focused on executives. Because what's happening is people are doing these great, amazing things, but if the executives are not on board, you're wasting your time, and you're wasting your energy, and people are getting burned out. So I'm having this conference so that we can educate them on what's important. So, my credentials. I always start here because people are like, who is she? What does she know? Well, I'm going to tell you what I know. I have a master's degree in training and development. Yeah, I do. Yeah. I am a former high school teacher. Yeah, so nothing you can say can embarrass me. I don't care. I've heard the worst. I am a certified special needs teacher, so I've worked with people with all abilities, all ages. I am currently pursuing my doctoral degree in business administration, specializing in technology entrepreneurship. I have finished all my coursework. I am now working on my doctoral study, which is successful strategies for increasing organizational knowledge sharing. Say that 4 times. And I'm currently turning a blog post that I wrote into a book, How to Leverage Organizational Culture for Competitive Advantage. That's who I am. All right. So we're going to talk about documentation. Let me give you a little background about like I said, I'm an educator. I'm a researcher. I've been in schools. I've been helping people transition into tech. People believe in the crap that coding is easy. Please stop telling people that. That is such a load of bull. Learning is hard. Learning a language is harder. And so people need documentation. So it's not just newbies. It's the people who use your products and services, or anybody who's going to need to read about these things. Do not think of this as for you. It's for someone else. So I'm like, okay, how do we make documentation fun? Because people are like, I don't want to do documentation. I don't want to do documentation. Okay, so how do we make it fun? So I figured, let's think of it as a novel. We're writing a book. We're being very creative. And so documentation can be seen as your effective and efficient way of telling your story. It is how you engage people. It's the most comprehensive way you have of telling people worldwide who would never see you what you're all about. Have to take it back to inclusion and diversity. In tech, for me, inclusion and diversity is not just about gender and race. It's about a whole bunch of things. It's about how do you include people in the conversation. And when you have great documentation, when people can figure out what the hell is going on, then they feel that they can be included in conversations. They know how to use your products and services. So it's a very good, it's a great point of inclusion and diversity. So what the doc? will help you both become a better reader and a writer of documentation, and understand it from a creative standpoint. And again, it's a way for you to tell your story, because all of us are self-motivated. We like to talk about ourselves. We're just so, it's like me. Like, I've just spent, 5 minutes telling you about me? Because I have the stage and you don't. And so that's what your documentation is. It's for you to tell your story. So we're going to consider it from your audience's perspective. This is not about you. And I'm going to say this even slower. This is not about you. You know your product or service. This documentation is for somebody who's coming to this thing that you want them to understand, so that they don't have to call your support line. That's what I get. People get, oh my God, they're calling the support line, because your documentation sucks. Why am I going to read this when I can just call somebody and, yeah, it's going to cost you money, but if you fixed your documentation, I wouldn't have this issue. So, if you're any chance that anybody's new to code, I always suggest, or new to your process, always suggest do a separate set of documentation for them. Do not allow someone who is new to whatever you're doing read a bunch of junk that they don't understand. So in your documentation, if it's online, put in a big red button for newbies. Green, I'm trying to think of accessibility. If red is the wrong color, I don't know. But just do something so that they know, because as you know, most times the person doesn't need to know all 20 steps to get started. They just need the first 3. And once they get the first 3 down, they feel more comfortable. And then they're able to, then you can say, once you get these down, you need to go read the rest of the documentation. But why spend 3 weeks reading something when that's not what you want to get up and start? You want to get up and running. So always think about doing something different for people who are new to your community. Use inclusive verbs, because it's your community. It's us. We're here for you. We care about we, us, our. They're feeling words. Because what you want them to do is buy into your product and service. You want them to invest the time into reading the documentation. You're not creating, it takes a lot of time to create this stuff, so you want them to read it, to engage with it. Don't make assumptions. Define all acronyms. Don't use slang. Spell everything out. I have to be honest. My talks are I speak at a lot of technical conferences, but my talks are very generic, powerful, but generic. So I have to admit, when I got accepted to Selenium, I had to ask, excuse me, what the hell is Selenium? Because I just looked, when I apply, at the time I was doing every Sunday, I'd sit down and apply to 10 conferences, particularly if it was places I wanted to go. And so that's how I started my thing. So when Selenium, I was like, so people were like, oh, okay, Test, I got you. So don't give me the jargon. I know enough tech to speak to techies and to translate it to non-techies and to be very dangerous, but not blow up stuff yet. I'm in that gray area. I'm dangerous, but can't blow things up. Keep it simple, Spot, but you know what that usually stands for. I'm trying to be nice. Don't use a 12-letter word when it's a 3-letter word. Don't do it. Your documentation is not about you, so it's not about you showing off. So when I'm writing my doctoral thesis, yes, I'm using words because it has to be peer-reviewed, and that's for that audience. But when I'm writing my book, it's going to be at a 7th grade reading level. I'm going to bring it down because I need to meet my audience where they are. Remember that your audience is not you, as I said. So make sure you learn a new way of communicating. And this is going to be a challenge for a lot of people. And I want to address, and I'm very spontaneous. I'm going to address the question that was in Ashley's talk yesterday, why we need the humanities. Because it's because of humanities and my liberal arts degree that I can figure out, base my level of communication on the audience that I'm in. I can see the forest and the trees. Most people who are working on code or testing, you just see the trees. It's very hard for you to back out and see the whole system. The last talk, Richard was talking about the complexity. You put something in, and do you ever go back and look at that thing? It takes someone who has learned, how to think, how to process, to be able to do this. So this is going to make a lot of you uncomfortable. But so what? It's not about you. You can do it. You can do it. Documentation is not a one-time event. It is a living document. As things change, build documentation updates into your process. So if you're on Scrum teams, if you're doing Kanban, whatever you're doing, Agile, I'm not even going to mention Waterfall, but whatever you're doing, as you make changes to your code, as you test, and don't just say pass or fail, give examples of what did you experience because of that pass or fail, and make sure you pass that information on. But that needs to be in the documentation. Every time there's a change to that product or service, the documentation needs to be updated, and it needs to be a part of the process. So just like when you have your Scrum teams and you have your testers, your product owner, your project, all these people on that team, there's somebody on that team should be responsible for updating the documentation. Because what happens is you finish a process and then there's so many changes that no one wants to do it. But if you put it in as a part of the process, it's just these little incremental things that you can expect, okay, every 2 weeks we got to do something about this. Incorporating feedback, that's that thing when you get a fail, or even if it passes, say why it passed. Richard, again, gave a great example of, he was speaking of a person whose site couldn't even come up, and they had 23 pass. Why? Obviously, there's something going on. If we communicate that, provide that feedback, it becomes easier to debug, it becomes easier to solve, it becomes easier to move forward. And if you can make your documentation searchable, just breathe with me on that. I don't have to go through, read 5 pages when the word I'm looking for is on page 5. Make it searchable. You guys are brilliant. You're doing stuff that people who are usually on Facebook are like, what? This stuff really happened? Somebody's actually doing this? You can figure this out. I'm sure there's a package for it somewhere. That would be a bonus. So if you're reading documentation, know why you're there. What problems are you trying to solve? Think about it from a reader's perspective. What problem are they trying to solve? They come to your documentation, what are the problems that they're usually trying to solve? And then be honest. Are there other things that could solve that problem better? Should they even be using your product or service? Should your product or service be the number 3 option after they've tried these things? Because I can tell you, if you're honest with, and you know this, if you're honest with someone and say, hey, if this is your first time doing this, we may not be the best option, but if you've tried these 2 things and it's failed, then people are like, oh, okay, thank you. They are party, they feel the we, the our, the us. Also, as Richard was saying, hey, why add all these things to your code if you don't need them? So make sure that they are there for the right reasons. So if they're a newbie, they need to look for newbie-friendly documentation, which means there needs to be newbie-friendly documentation. Make sure that you read it as an abstract or an introduction. I'm giving an example of what I'm talking about here. So it's like reading the back cover of a book. You want to give people as much about why they're there as possible. So just provide an abstract. This project it solves this problem. This is how we do it. Bam. Read the code of conduct. If there's a code of conduct to the community or the project, people need to read it, but you need to make code of conducts easy to read. And this is where the inclusion and diversity part of me comes in, because a lot of people think code of conducts are the end. A code of conduct is the first step. A code of conduct is reactionary. That's why a lot of people have pushback on code of conducts. That's why a lot of code of conducts aren't successful. You need them in place because you need a line to delineate appropriate behavior and inappropriate behavior. But that's not enough because people interpret words differently. That's why we want to break it down and keep things simple. We want to make sure that everybody who comes to this documentation, there is very little room for misinterpretation. And so I'm just going to give a caveat of what I'm talking about. Let's say we're talking about sexual harassment. Every code of conduct talks about sexual harassment, every one of them. Well, you put the code of conduct in place, and even at every conference, I'm going to be honest, I don't read every code of conduct because I have an idea of how they want me to behave. So let's say it's a thing about sexual harassment. So if you put that in place, that's not enough because as we've seen, people have different definitions of what sexual harassment is. So then you go the next step of educating people on how you define sexual harassment and what that means for in this community. Sexual harassment in this community is this thing. But that's not enough because then you have to go a step further and say sexual harassment for people in leadership means this. Because as you know, when you're in a leadership role, when people feel that they are coerced or sexual harassed, it's a power issue. It's not your peers. So then you need to go a step further. That's how I want your documentation to be. It's tedious up front, but then you have less problems in the back end. Do your research before asking questions that include what you find with your questions. So as a reader, Stack Overflow is a great example of this. Oh, my word. Not newbie friendly at all. I don't even think human friendly. But so when you go to Stack Overflow, you should, and I tell newbies this, make sure you take the error. So you Google the error, you end up on a page. So before you ask the question, make sure you have, again, this helps you if you have searchability, they can research the problem so that they can find it on their own. And then if they can't, then they need, because I remember my first time somebody asked me for a stack trace. I was like, dude, what are you talking about? And he just kept saying it, and he kept getting more aggressive about it. I was like, dude, I don't know what a stack trace is, so if you can't tell me what it is, you just need to get off this thing because we're not communicating here. And then someone stepped in and thank you, that's all I needed because I did not know what that was. So I need you to think about how people come to this and the questions they have. First of all, if they come into you and they're coming to the documentation with a problem, they're already agitated. Just assume that. Just assume that that this is just about to ruin their day. So what you want to do is improve their day. You want to make this process as simple as possible. And you want to make things as searchable as possible. And you want to give them guidelines of how to ask questions, where to find things. Also, you want to follow a style guideline, and I'll talk about that. You want, these are for people who can, if it's an open source project and they're contributing, and they're trying to figure out how to contribute to this thing, you should have created a style guideline. These are the things, this is how you do a pull request, this is how the merge process, this is how we answer questions, that kind of thing, and offer to help. When you can't find an answer to a problem, it's like your heart starts beating really fast, you start sweating, you can't focus. It's like you could have been having somebody could have just brought you the best cup of, I don't drink coffee, but hot chocolate, and that just goes all out the window because you can't find the answers that you want. It's not rational, but humans aren't rational. We're just human. We have emotions. So just figure out ways that you can offer to help, because as you offer me more help, my heart stops. My heart not stops. Oh, Lord, no, doesn't stop. It slows down to a pace that doesn't cause me to want to breathe into a bag. So this is how you're going to tell your story. You know, every good story starts with once upon a time. So these are your three areas of concern: how people are introduced, how people use, and how people contribute. So these are the three things you need to be thinking about: how people are introduced to your product and service, how people use your product or service, and then if you have a contribution, how people contribute. And these are the types of documentation you need to think about. There needs to be a space for experienced developers or people who know Selenium, but you've had an update and they're trying to figure out how this one thing works. You don't want to send them to the newbie thing. That's only going to frustrate them. You want to have something for newbies, foreign language speakers. You want to have, being from the US, we just assume, because everything is in English, that everybody speaks English. And if they don't, oh well. But that's not inclusive. And I find that, just being in Germany, I don't know any German. I can pantomime really well, but I don't know German. And I really realize how at a disadvantage I am when I don't speak the language. Individuals with disabilities, how are they going to access your documentation and use your documentation? Be they physical, cognitive, visual? And most importantly, for our non-technical users, we all have managers or people in our organizations who have no idea what you're doing. And so every time you mention something, they're like, yeah, dude, don't get it. I just know you're costing me on the bottom line. They have no idea what you're doing. But as you educate these people and get them to understand why we need someone on the team who writes documentation, or we share it or whatever, but we need time to do this. Once you educate them on the value of it, they're like, okay. But when you don't, they don't get it. And yet, there's so many non-technical people who are evaluating you for your raises and such. And I don't get it, but it is what it is. I think everybody needs a basic level of computational thinking, particularly now, because there's so many non-technical people having to deal with technical people, and it's quite frustrating for them. Because let's be honest, you guys can be quite condescending. And you don't mean to a lot of times, but for any adult, when they don't know, think about technology is the only industry I know where you can be hired not as an expert, and you're paid to make mistakes. What other industry is that allowed? Can't do it as an attorney. You have to be an expert, and if you make a mistake, you're liable. A doctor, educator, all of it. So people just don't get that how you do your job is totally different than anything else. So you have to educate them on that. So this is how you create your abstract. What is the project? What is the product? What is the service? What problems are we trying to solve? How do we use this to solve problems? Because a lot of times, again, this is the things you understand. They can go to it, but they still don't understand how this thing will solve my problem. Lay it out like breadcrumbs. Make it as simple as possible. This is how we do this. Install A. Oh, my God, that's the next one. The list of tools that are needed. If they have to get an environment up to do something, please give them a list of everything they're going to need to get this thing done. No one likes installing, you think you got your environment up, and all of a sudden the terminal says blah, 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 blah. And you're like, what is this? Which means you're going to have to constantly update your documentation because they're constantly updating these packages and everything else. Someone needs to keep an eye on that thing. But make a list. Don't have somebody they're already frustrated. Don't have them have to go Google what these things are. Just create a list and make it clickable. Wow. Click. Opens a new tab. Just do that for them. Just tab right there. Easy. Link to a newbie page, which includes the basic instructions that talks about any jargon, anything that they need, the first basic steps. Have that ready. Because I'm going to tell you, it's not just newbies who are going to use it. It's going to be someone who's been working on this thing for some time, but they've been focused in this other area, and they don't know what the hell you're doing over here. So they're going to be able to go back and look, okay, familiarize themselves. Okay, got you. That makes sense. And then they go back to that thing. So it's not going to be just newbies. So provide a place for that. And if you haven't realized this, I mean provide a place for that, because I keep talking about it over and over and over again. So the body includes steps and instructions for setting things up, using and how to use a product, linked to any external documentation. If there are videos, because I learn best by videos. So if there's a YouTube, I can do anything if there's a YouTube channel. Woo, buddy. If I can Google and find a YouTube video or something, I am in heaven. I don't need anybody. Maybe to hold something up if it takes a two-man team, but I can figure stuff out on YouTube. So just link to those things. Just makes your life easier. Just makes your life easier. Something you didn't have to create. It's already out there. But you do want to vet it to make sure the information is updated and correct. Add documentation updates to your merge process. Whenever there's a change, make sure that somebody is updating that thing. And create a definition guide that includes symbols and terms, and just create that. Just have it on the side so somebody can click, okay, that's what that thing is, and then they can go back to what they're, because it's not, don't assume that people are stupid. It's just a lot of, I'm getting a DBA, which is a Doctors of Business Administration, which also stands for doing business as. You don't want to make assumptions. There are a lot of acronyms because there are only so many letters in the alphabet, well, in the English alphabet, and they just keep using them over and over again for different things. They mean different things in different industries. So make sure you keep, again, we don't want to make assumptions. We want to keep things simple. So we want to make sure everybody knows that when it comes to this project, this is what these things mean. So this is your handbook for people who want to contribute. Create a code of conduct that outlines how community members are expected to behave. And again, we want to go further than the code of conduct. We want to give examples. This is what we mean when we say this. It looks like this. If you're experiencing whatever that looks like this is who you contact. Explain the process. So if they're contributing, there is a pull request. Then if you have to clone the project, whatever, and then you submit the pull request. And then there is a 3-day wait period while we evaluate this thing before we merge or give you any feedback. Because people have worked hard on these things. Please provide them with feedback, particularly that most of them are doing it for free. Feedback is at least the least you can do. Well, no, the least you can do is absolutely nothing. But it's the best thing you can do. Come up with a code comment style guide that ensures consistency. So if they're doing things that affect the code base or whatever, you want everybody's thing to look the same. You want it to look like that. Let's say there's a book that there are several contributors. Every contributor has a different chapter. They all give those chapters to one team that puts the book together so that it all is consistent. You do not want to open up a book and then there's Comic Sans on one page, unless it's supposed to be, and then there's Times New Roman on this, and then somebody made their own animation drawings, and you want consistency. And then if there's something that a bug fix that, or a test that failed within your organization or your communities, flag them as newbie things. Why waste your time doing that? Give it to someone who's new so they can get practice of how this process works. Flag it. In GitHub, they have, the flags, the different colors, and so that they know, hey, someone has something for me. I can go get this thing. I can contribute. So that is the presentation. Are there any questions? First of all, I do have, how many of you write documentation or responsible for documentation? Okay. So any questions, comments, or concerns? Yes?
My question is about, you're telling about documentation and also about newbies.
Sorry, let me hand you a microphone. This is going to be neat.
You're also talking about the newbies, the documentation. I'm also a collaborator in, for example, Projector project. And what I see, the documentation is very, very good. If you file an issue, you get a template you can fill in. But still, people don't read it. So you have your documentation, they're not reading it, they're not providing the information you need to debug an issue, and it keeps motivating or demotivating people. So how do you deal with that? So, because documentation, in my opinion, is good.
Well, I'm going to say this, and it's not, but again, it's not about you. So I would, this person or these people, hey, what about our documentation that allows you that is keeping you from doing this thing? And just ask. We ask, and do it in a nice way. You don't want to sound like you're, slapping their hand or anything. But hey, we ask, and not that specific person, but just do a poll. This is our process. We're finding that people aren't doing it this way. Is there something about our process that needs to be fixed? Simple. Well, not simple, but it's simple in that you can do that. And then you get feedback. Again, you need the feedback. So if it's not working, don't assume it's them. It's you.
All right.
That's how we think we're smarter than everybody in the room, but we're really not. Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.
All right.